Casey, the year is 2003, and you were dressed in a green tuxedo wearing a mustache on your face as the doorman in The Wizard of Oz at Village 7 Presbyterian Church. You remember that?
2003? Are you kidding me?
Oh.
2009. You know, actually, now that I think about it, that kind of proves your point, doesn't it? A long time ago, yes, I was. I'll say it. I was the doorman of Oz in a production of The Wizard of Oz, and let's just say had a blast.
You had a blast. That was kind of
singing and dancing.
Yours and my intro to theater of any kind.
Community theater. So true. And not only was I the doorman of Oz, Carlin, I was also a munchkin. I'm proud to say it.
You were a munchkin? They let you be
this?
A munchkin?
They let me in.
Weren't you also a jitterbug?
Yeah. I was not a jitterbug, but I could have been a jitterbug if the need had arisen. I think I was a backup for the jitterbugs, but
you were a jitterbug
I proudly
understudy.
I was an understudy jitterbug. I couldn't quite make jitterbug, but I was a member of the Lollipop Guild in Oz.
Now that is a esteemed position.
Prestigious, I would say.
But we're not here to talk about The Wizard of Oz. We're here to talk about its successor prequel, Wicked.
Are people born wicked? Or do they have wickedness thrust upon them? You're green.
I am.
No one mourns the wicked. You owe me $1 anytime you feel like you need to break out into song during this podcast. Okay?
How about I Venmo you my entire bank account? Because, Carlin, I want to confess something right now. I've never seen it on Broadway. The first time I ever heard anything related to Wicked was watching this film about a week ago. Isn't that wild?
That's wicked and wild.
That's wicked.
You knew of it, surely.
Of course, but I mostly through theater nerds that I love in my life, who I'm very close with, and they sing it. Hannah sings it. My wife.
Hannah sings Wicked. I knew I liked her for some good reason.
She loves musical theater. Are you kidding? And I feel like just about every teen girl who was around in the decade that following when this came out definitely had a Wicked stage. Do you feel like that's true?
I didn't quite have a Wicked stage, but I have this weird thing where I don't listen to a musical until I've seen it on stage.
Why is that?
I just really like to understand it in the context of the story. I always like it better that way.
Yeah.
But I have done probably 3 or 4 different numbers from Wicked in various dance recitals and theater cabarets and such. So I was really familiar with like 3 songs.
Yeah.
But then also I saw this, not to flex.
Go on and flex. Go on.
But I did see it in London this last spring, and that was like a dream come true. It was so cool. But the movie knocked my socks off. I loved it. Did you love it?
Genuinely, I hope I don't have to turn in my man card for saying this. I loved it.
Yeah?
It was incredible. Yeah.
Tell me what you loved about it. What stood out to you? It's kind of cool. You got to see it like as a blank canvas as well. Like you had no prior conceptions.
The first thing that smacks you full in the face is the first thing that smacks you.
What smacks you?
The first thing that grabs you by the collar and slaps you around a little bit is the vocal prowess of Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo. Their singing is unreal. The notes they're hitting, like how fun this is to listen to.
Uh-huh.
You don't always see talent like that displayed. It was like stunning. I really was like blown away by their vocal performances.
Did you know they sang live on set? We're hearing their actual performance. This isn't dubbed over in a recording studio.
That is crazy. Yeah. Oh, and because I watched an interview where they were talking about, I had to sing this while I was in a harness, et cetera, et cetera. You know, that's cool. That's just talent. Like when you see raw talent like that, it's a thing of beauty.
Yes.
I loved every made up word in this script. Braverism, disrespectation, encouragerize. Like I chuckled every time they slipped one of those in. That was a treat. The Jeff Goldblum reveal.
Yeah.
Holy cow. Jeff Goldblum will never not make me laugh, honestly. And when he's like, well, it's a bit much, but people have come to expect that sort of thing, and you got to give the people what they want.
He's the perfect casting choice.
What did you like about it on this rewatch?
Oh yeah. Well, I just love the locations. And the same thing with like the vocal performance being live. They built practical sets.
Yeah.
For all these shots, which I just love that there is still a really strong value for that in modern filmmaking. It's like we realized that the green screen didn't have the same charm or magic, and so I love when directors are committed to building the spaces. So, they planted like 3 million tulips or something. That's not an exact number, but they planted those tulips for the opening shot in Munchkin Land.
Wow.
Yeah.
And did they burn the witch in effigy for real?
They really did.
And how about that? You were telling me about the green train.
Yeah, they built that train.
That's sweet.
I just
As someone who builds sets and stuff, I bet you were loving that.
I loved it. Yeah, I wonder how much of it is the magic you get from you can tell. Like your eye is actually really good at telling when we're looking at something real versus we're looking at a computer generated image, which that gap is closing rapidly and a lot of people can't tell anymore. But I also wonder like how much of it comes through in the actor's performance.
Oh yeah. And I know what you're saying, like we're getting better at making CGI, but I just think people can tell. Like the reason I say that is 20 years ago, when films like The Polar Express came out, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm looking at real people. I'm looking at real people right now.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that's not real.
Or Shrek.
Yeah, I was like, Shrek is real. I believe Shrek is real. Actually, Shrek is real. Changed my mind. Actually, not even making a joke anymore. Actually, I believe in Shrek. So, just a little quirk about me. I believe in Shrek.
He's a 10. Ladies, he's a 10, but he believes Shrek is real. And you can't convince him otherwise.
That's hilarious. And he gets defensive and angry, ladies. He's like, stop it. Like, God, stop making fun of Shrek. Carlin, what the heck are the themes of Wicked?
Yeah, okay. I'm glad you asked. Because this is a podcast about the themes and ideas in movies. But
That's right.
Also because, we've been on this kind of follow the character arc train for a while, which I think is helpful. But for this movie, I really want to ask the question that is kind of like our Cinema Snorkel question.
Which is?
What are the filmmakers trying to say?
Yeah, you're darn right.
Because especially this movie, I don't know what your experience has been, but I hear a lot of it. People try to politicize it pretty quickly. Which, there's a place for that, like political commentary or current events or whatever. But I think good art tells a good story, and it should be true regardless of the settings. Otherwise, if it's just about what's happening in the culture today, then it's propaganda. And propaganda is like not good art.
Yes. So let me ask you this then, Carlin. Do you think Wicked tells a good story? Or do you think it slips into propaganda?
I think the story has had staying power through generations and decades. So I think it's telling an amazing story and a classic story. The follow-up question I would want to ask is, did this version fall into the trap of being politicized? And I think the reason why I liked it so much is it felt refreshingly safe from the commentary that was buzzing around it. Like, I think it resists being pulled into that. But I could be wrong. I don't know. What do you think?
This is my take, and we'll explore this more. I think it's true to the story it's trying to tell. That doesn't mean that I agree with everything necessarily, but I think it's real. I think it's good art in that they tell a story and they're committed to that story.
Yeah.
And they're not quite beating you over the head with something. There's more depth to it than that. Right?
Yep. I love that.
And, the more I thought about it too, the more I actually have come to think that this is just a continuation of what The Wizard of Oz was.
Ooh.
It just takes it a step further, right? The point of The Wizard of Oz is there is no man behind the curtain, or there's just a small, sad, weird little man behind the curtain. And the answers were within you the whole time.
Yeah.
The Cowardly Lion gets a little badge for being brave or whatever, and the Tin Man gets a heart. But all along, they show courage, they show tenderness, and the straw man has brains, blah, blah, blah. All you needed was within you all along, right?
Just click your ruby slippers and go home.
She had them from day one. You always had what you needed, which in the 1939 Wizard of Oz movie, that's pretty avant-garde stuff, right? And so the point of The Wizard of Oz is, don't be bamboozled by the theatrics of the wizard. Don't look to some giant pie-in-the-sky wizard to solve your problems, right? Kind of need to take it in your own hands, like go splash some water on the Wicked Witch and, do what you need to do to get out of here.
Yeah.
And Wicked totally follows that up. In fact, they just follow the premises of Oz to their next logical conclusion, which is like, yeah, the wizard's a complete sham and he's wicked. They're bad.
Yeah.
The ones perpetrating this whole system are complicit in a massive lie.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they're just going to subvert it even further. They're not taking really some beloved tale that didn't already have this embedded in it and adding something new. They're just continuing what the Wizard of Oz already did.
Right. Whereas first it's a man behind the curtain, and now it's the witch that you were so eager to villainize. Turns out she's not actually wicked.
Right.
She's just been labeled that way by scared people.
Right. Now, when you go back and watch the 1939 Wizard of Oz, there's not a lot lovable about the witch. Fly, my monkeys, fly!
Right, and she really does die, and she really does enslave Dorothy. But then, the question being...
What a world! What a world! Sorry, I'm done.
That's nice.
Go ahead.
I think you owe me $1 for that, too, actually. The question at the end of The Wizard of Oz is, was it all a dream? Because each one of the characters is represented by real people in Dorothy's life. And she maybe got bumped on the head.
It was all a dream trope. We know it. We love it.
But she learned that the somewhere over the rainbow is like the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence, and maybe she should just learn to be content with what she has. Like, she has everything she wants at home. She just hasn't seen it yet.
I don't know. The 1939 movie is a relic of a different age, and we should probably do our own episode on The Wizard of Oz. But yeah, because there's some subverting of things, and there's some like good old morality tale, and it's weird. I gotta just say this. As a kid, watching The Wizard of Oz is a big fat disappointment. I don't know. I can't be alone in feeling that. Like, all the hubbub was for nothing.
Yeah, there's no wizard? What?
Like, this is sure dumb. Like, that's what I thought.
Yeah. Ooh, does it feel kind of like growing up a little bit? Like when you're a kid, you're like Santa and the Easter Bunny and the world is magical and big. And then when you get old, you realize like, actually the world's not that big. Like my parents have made mistakes and I have to pay my rent,
I'll tell you one thing that stays constant though. Those monkeys are the stuff of nightmare. They are the LSD nightmare fuel now and forever.
Yeah, you have dreams about those monkeys?
I don't want to talk about the monkeys anymore, if I'm being honest.
Hey, what if you took the monkeys from Gladiator 2 and you combined them with the monkeys from Wicked?
They weren't already the same thing? Gladiator... I thought Gladiator 2 just said, let's pull a page right out of Wicked. Sorry, we've dunked on Gladiator 2 more than enough.
Yeah, if you want more of that, you know where to find it. Just skip back an episode in the podcast feed. Okay, back to the movie at hand. So the themes are already familiar to us because they are embedded in The Wizard of Oz. But But say them, Casey. What do you think is kind of pick out some of the biggest threads
Well,
that are going on?
you know, the glory of this being a soundtrack is you can go back and listen to the soundtrack. And, you know, musicals are a genre that is often not subtle. They tell you what they're thinking. They sing it at you. And that's actually not to detract. That's just the art form. It's cool.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the first one is the question they ask Galinda right at the beginning. Galinda, why are people wicked? And she says, well, are people born wicked or do they have wickedness thrust upon them? And I'll give you 3 guesses as to which one the film answers is true.
I only need one guess. Elphaba is not wicked.
Not even in the slightest. She's a white knight. She is virtuous. She's humble. She genuinely cares for others. She's truly maybe the only good character in the whole thing, other than her nurse, who is a bear.
Oh, that's right.
Dulcie Bear. I think everyone else is bad, you know, or just like grievously, if they're not like evil to the core or like lying, deceitful people or like abusive, or like self-interested, then they're like just badly arrogant and misled about who the bad guy is. In the lens of the filmmaker, I truly think it's Elphaba versus the world.
Okay, interesting. Well, what about Galinda then?
See, that's where I actually would go back to my initial take. At first I was like, yeah, their answer's obvious. I think Galinda adds a little bit of the twist that this film needs to kind of ground it, because it's like layers of subversion. Okay, we know Elphaba is good and everyone's bad. I found myself wrestling with what's Galinda's whole spiel. Like, we know that she's self-absorbed, but you actually, in that opening number, she's like, it couldn't have been easy for her. And even the townspeople are like, yeah, she's wicked. Burn her, kill her. And Galinda's like, isn't it sad that the wicked die alone? There's just enough like little nuance there that actually I found myself drawn to. Both characters, honestly, because the acting, the performance was incredible. But I think Galinda kind of opens up a little more of the shades of gray in this, because she's wrestling with her presuppositions and who she thinks is wicked and what goodness actually means.
Right, totally.
Did you see that?
I mean, I know how it ends. So I've seen part 2.
This is incredible. I don't know what happens in part 2 of Wicked. We probably should have disclaimered that right away.
Oh, I kind of like that, actually. Let's lean into this. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I don't know, Carlin. My big question is, gosh, help me. Does Alphabet...
I'm keeping that in there. That's horrendous.
Oh, gosh.
Elphaba's like one of the most beloved characters of all stage performance of all time. How can you not know her name?
I know. I suck. I'm the wicked one.
No one will
am
warn
the
you.
Villain. My big question right now is, does Alphabet ever do anything genuinely bad the whole time?
Yeah. Right. Does she?
That's where I'm at. I actually don't know what they're going to do.
Does she earn the title Wicked? Or is it
Yes.
just a label that the people have slapped on her?
Carlin, that question to me is going to make all the difference.
Yeah.
Because,
Interesting.
you know, we talk about human nature all the time. Dang it, we're already getting into our own worldview, but in some ways that's what I have to offer right now. Not knowing how they're going to land this plane. And they did this to us. They did a part 1er and a part 2er on us. You know, I didn't know that was coming.
Yeah, well, most people have seen it.
Okay, touche. I'll take my lumps. I'm just guessing. Okay, but we talk about human nature all the time on this show. A nuanced version of human nature takes into consideration that bad things happen to us and that we make our choices in response to those things. It has to have both ingredients or it's going to fall flat. If your view of wickedness is, well, you chose it and you did it all bad and you deserve what's coming to you, buddy, then you don't have an accurate view of evil in the world and brokenness.
Yeah.
But likewise, if your view is like, you're just battered down and misunderstood, and the main thing you need to do is grab your power, and good for you, girl, and guy, I guess. But
Right. Slay the haters.
slay the haters, slay them. You're badly missing the point as well. So to me, this story's allowed to do whatever they want to do with their worldview, but I'm going to find it way more compelling if I can see both of those elements of human nature at play. And I think you see it right now the clearest in Galinda, because Elphaba is truly good. She never does anything, as far as I can tell, wrong in this entire first half. Like, she just wants to care for her sister. She actually is a good friend to Galinda. She doesn't take the dude. She could, but she chooses to be like, listen, suck it up. You're not that girl, right? And she says, come with me to Oz. She helps Galinda get on the train and come. And that's sweet and refreshing.
Yeah.
You like Elphaba's character so much. And Galinda's wrestling with her. So anyway, that's where I'm at. But talk to me. Talk to me about, Legolas, what do your elf eyes see?
Let's talk more about Galinda, because I think you're right. At least for this movie, Elphaba is like shiny, good, perfect. She doesn't really have that much transformation, except for she's a little insecure maybe about some of who she is, and she ends up like really coming into her own and saying, I'm done following, I'm done putting my trust in false heroes. She gets badly disappointed. But then she just decides to take her power into her hands and do something about it. Which maybe before she's been a little passive. She tries to use her voice, she tries to do this, but mostly she just shuts up and bows out and lets things happen how they happen. She wants to fight her father for Nessa Rose to have her freedom. But she also is like, okay, I'll just go along with it. I'll just go along and go along and go along. But then she starts seeing bad things happening. Especially Dr. Dillamond, the goat teacher, who gets taken, and she's like, we're all just gonna stand here and do nothing. But then she takes her seat and doesn't do anything. And it's actually Fiyero who's the one that's like, come on, are we gonna do something about this or not? So Elphaba has power and opportunity, but she doesn't have the confidence to use the power to do what's right. And she's still, I think, the insight for me on this point comes from The Wizard and I, when like halfway through the song, she's singing about, oh my gosh, when I meet the wizard. And then she goes into this verse about maybe he will want to degreenify me. Not that that's important to me, because I really don't care what people think. But secretly that is the desire of her heart, is to just be normal and to just be accepted, and to just fit in a little bit more.
That's so true. And at the end, she realizes, I have to let this go. I can never fit in. I'm different, and that's a good thing. I'm the only one who actually sees the truth of what's going on here and is going to do something about it. Yeah. So her journey is totally about seizing her power and living into her own narrative.
Yeah, the wizard offers her. There's a moment where he's like, is this the desire of your heart? Oh, he hands her the doll, and she goes, oh, she's green. Like, she's disappointed. And he's like, is that the desire of your heart? Can I change this for you? And that's the moment when she says, no, there's a problem with the animals, and that's what I want you to help me with. And that's her hero moment for, obviously like not the most dramatic moment, but to me, that moment really stood out as I'm putting aside my selfish desire, or not selfish, but like an understandable desire, but it's only benefiting herself. She's putting that aside to focus on the greater problem at hand.
Totally her hero moment. So, Carlin, with Elphaba's story, here's what I'm curious if what they're building to. Because there's two paths, again. One could be she's actually like a freedom fighter who cares about the animals. She stays selfless. When offered the world, she actually says, I care about the animals. And everyone's taken aback by that because their hearts are wicked and darkened and selfish and corrupt. And she could stay true to that version of herself because that's who she really is. But a piece of me feels like they're setting her up for the perfect victim plot. And we talk about this a lot. Mm-hmm. Inside every human heart is the desire to be so justified that you can do whatever you want. And what better
Yeah.
way to justify Elphaba's transformation to the Wicked Witch than have her try to do the right thing in a genuine act of selflessness and get totally shut down by every power that is. And so then, again, the tone the filmmakers take is everything here.
Yeah.
Are we going to be like, so, okay, that's how it is. Well, now I'm going to seize my power and no one can really blame me for being wicked. And the audience is meant to be like, yeah, no one can really blame her for being wicked. Go, girl, be
Right.
wicked. Tear it all down. Eat the rich. Burn the system, right? Or is she going to take a mortal wound and we actually then see her choose to seize her power, but the film treats it like maybe a selfish thing that she's doing. And she actually is doing something wrong at that point for the first time. And the film is willing to look at it and say, yeah, okay, she got beaten up, and so we understand where she's coming from, but we're not justifying it. There's a world of
Right.
difference between those. One is the perfect victim story that we all in our hearts kind of want. And the other one could be a really
Yep.
accurate villain story about how, yeah, this is how you make a villain. And at the end of the day, she succumbed to this and followed the rabbit hole all the way down. And where
Yeah.
I'm sitting, it could be either, because I'm the most naive person about Wicked in the whole world. I might be the only one left who hasn't seen the whole thing.
You probably are. It is interesting that so in both of those options, the unblemished hero gets wounded and then chooses to do wicked. But the tone of the filmmakers determines whether we see her like rise to villainy, as it were, as a positive justified thing, and we're kind of like, yep, we're on this revenge bandwagon, or this victim bandwagon, or if we're like, oh, this is now a tragedy because what she could have been, but she chose to give in to wickedness. But there is a third
Yeah.
option,
Okay.
and that is that she gets painted as the villain, she gets wounded deeply, but she chooses not to do what's evil. She continues to do what's good, even though everyone expects and blames her regardless.
In which case, this is just a straightforward critique of the system. Like,
Yeah.
you know, there are
Mm.
systems in life and people tell you they're good and they put on a show and they're glitzy and they're blonde and they're popular. And those people are all basically bad and they're the villains. And it's always really the outcasts who are the good guys.
The people who do good are going to get spat out. The people who do good are always the
Underdogs, the least privileged, and that is so in the water. But that story, though it is a subversion of whatever, I guess like Grimm's fairy tales or something, is itself a pretty vanilla worldview. Like, yep, it's not the rich that are the good guys, it's the poor.
Right.
Whereas I think the truth cuts down the middle, and there are particular pitfalls to being rich that are often not
Yeah.
talked about. And we need to shine a light on those. And there are particular pitfalls. There are bad things that you can do when
Yeah.
you're poor. And those are your own decision. You know, no one makes you do things. And in between, there's a whole plethora of like moral gray areas. Like Aladdin steals a loaf of bread and, you know, tosses a half each to the starving kids. I think that's a pretty benign. If that's wrong, then, you know, well, whatever, lock me up. You know, it's not really that bad. So that's, those are the worldviews we're playing
Right.
with there, right? I like what we've clarified so far, which is that Galinda's character arc is really dealing with perception of what is good and what is evil. And she has this whole paradigm of goodness and evil, and it's totally being messed with by Elphaba. But Elphaba's character arc is about trying so hard to fit in, so badly wanting to fit in, and really trying your best to fit in, and realizing I can't fit in, and more than that, I shouldn't fit in. I shouldn't try to fit in. Those are the two themes I think they're really playing with in this film.
Because Galinda, who is the perfect popular girl, but she can go outside the lines that she's like meant to color inside because her friends turn on her, like when she dances with
Yeah.
Elphaba. her two friends are like, what are you doing? Stop this. Like, you could break your popularity, essentially. But she, in that moment, decides, like, no, I admire Elphaba. I pity her. I feel awful that I did something bad and I regret it. So I'm going to use my popularity to try to redeem some of her reputation here.
That is her hero moment, right? And she takes responsibility. She set her up to wear that dumb hat.
Yes. I don't hate anybody that much.
So she then, that's her hero moment.
And it's fitting because if you're going to humiliate someone, then the thing it should cost you to make repair for that is she humiliates herself by jumping out there and just dancing with her in this really silly way.
Isn't that awesome? Their friendship is the most compelling part of all of this, obviously, as anyone who's seen this for 20 years could have told me. Yeah, thank you. This is why you're here. You're here for the best hot take. Breaking new ground. New ground. Wait, Carlin, what if that's what this is about? Actually, their friendship.
Wait a minute. But they're so different.
No, I can't make sense of it. I can't make heads of it. Got anything to add? Our hands are totally tied because of the part 1 nature of this. We would have a longer podcast.
And that's okay. It could be a short podcast. And we'll have another in a year from now. When so Galinda, she begins that character moment when she stands up for Elphaba. Then they become friends, which is hilarious and so fun to watch. But then the same decision comes back again when it's like, okay, Elphaba, she's run out of options. She's got to escape on her flying broom. And she's like, Galinda, come with me.
Yeah.
And Galinda says no that time.
Yeah. Do we think the filmmakers are showing Galinda do something genuinely bad in that moment? Or do we think that they're giving her a little bit of space to say, maybe what she's doing is just her truth?
Oh, interesting.
It's her alternate. It's her seizing her path forward, but it's not necessarily intrinsically morally wrong what she's doing. What do you think?
Oof. That's an interesting question. It feels kind of ambiguous. When I watch that, I'm thinking, oh, it's a tragedy. Galinda, like, she's selling out to the wizard and to Mrs. Morrible. She's just giving back into her old nature. You know, now the only thing different now is she has a little bit more complex understanding of what is evil. But she's not willing to put her own popularity really on the line for what she believes in. And to me, it's a tragedy. But it didn't feel like the movie was making that strong of a stance on that scene. It did seem like they were kind of like, you know, everyone has to do what they feel like they have to do.
It does feel like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I couldn't put my finger on what gives me that impression. Again, I don't know what the musical does with that. To me, the same moral calculus that lets us say it's right to stand up for the animals, it's right to get out of the Emerald City, you know, don't accept the wizard's offer. It's not just your path. It's like, it would be wrong to do that. Is the same moral calculus that would let us say, you know, Galinda did something genuinely wrong there. And we understand why, but it's a genuine tragedy. But if they blunt the impact of Elphaba's seizing of her power and say, hey, it's her path, it's totally right, it's completely acceptable, they're also blunting our impact to say that Galinda did the wrong thing in going along with essentially the huge lie that is the Wizard of Oz, right?
Yeah, if it's okay for Galinda to stay, then why is it so heroic for Elphaba to run away? Or to go away?
And there we get to the heart of the problem with a postmodern worldview, Carlin. Again, I don't know enough about Wicked to say, is it truly postmodern? Postmodernism is defined, it's a philosophical trend that's defined by a rejection of sort of absolute morality. Like, there's some things that are right for everybody, there's some things that are wrong for everybody. And an embrace of live your story, live your truth.
Yeah.
Now, postmodernism is totally in the water with Wicked. My question is it a thorough-baked postmodern story?
Because you could still have Wicked in an atmosphere that wasn't postmodern. You can tell a story about corrupt power and underdogs seizing their, opportunities, and
Totally.
that not be postmodern. They're not the exact one-to-one.
No, postmodernism is essentially means rejecting that one person can tell another person what's right or wrong for them. In a nutshell, that's what postmodernism is. It's not completely wrong. Like, you can see how we get there, actually. The arrogance of the Munchkins, for example, being like, goodness knows, we know what wickedness is. No, they don't. They've never met Elphaba. They don't know the first thing about her. They're so arrogant and small-minded, right? So there's room for like, dang, have I really listened to someone else's story? I might not have all the facts here. That's what postmodernism gets right. And it rejects that kind of rigidity that modernism and, everything that came before it sort of stands for.
But just by taking a skeptical view of people's stories, or taking a skeptical look at the institutions and the facts as we know them, and just saying, I'm going to question things and say, is this really what I think?
Irony of postmodernism is it's a self-defeating worldview, because to believe that no one path is the only way to truth, you have to believe that is true. It's true definitively for everybody that no one's one perspective is more true than another.
Right. So how do you know that's true?
Yeah. How do you know that that's true? Or that's just your perspective?
It's a fallacy. Like, it's just a logical impossibility.
Whereas to truly appreciate someone else's story, you actually need not just skepticism of quote unquote the establishment. You need a deep and abiding love of what's true. You have to love other people and love the truth so much that you're willing to pursue it, even if it breaks your presuppositions. So the way we actually accomplish what postmodernism wants us to accomplish is not by rejecting the idea of truth. It's by embracing it deeper and being like, wow, I'm one piece here of the puzzle. I might not have the full picture, but it's possible to know the truth about another person's story. And I should try really hard to get there.
And that is what would cause Elphaba, who knows deep down that animals are people too in Oz. And if she believes that so fervently that she's willing even to be labeled a wicked witch and to be universally hated because she has such a strong conviction about what's true.
Yeah. Wicked so clearly has a moral compass. But if it's a postmodern work, then what they're going to be busy telling you is that there is no moral compass. There is no man behind the curtain, right? They're setting up their own, this is some chewy stuff. They're setting up their own man behind the curtain, like get upset that everyone's mistreating the animals, but also follow your path fully. And what makes it seem like a hollow work of fiction in the end would be if they just have Elphaba's journey towards seizing her power perfectly happen to align with doing the right thing every single time. Like, it's so convenient, isn't it, that Elphaba absolutely taking what she wants most in life and being her own person and marching to the beat of her own drum. It's so convenient that actually aligns with the only just cause we've been presented with, which is the cause of the animals, who are people who are being carted away and jailed and losing their ability to talk. Like, in the real world, those two things would diverge and you'd have to pick one or the other. So I'm so curious how they're going to handle it, because the witch we meet in 1939 is someone who's enslaved a bunch of flying monkeys and treats the Winkies horribly. She's got these Winky guards. She hates them. She hates everybody. She's a real villain, Are they going to just say all of that is a lie? She actually is the White Knight. She's never fallen off her charger. She really is just completely misunderstood by the genuinely evil to the core people of the Emerald City and the Wizard of Oz. They're the baddies.
Yeah.
That's the story that, I don't know. I'm just waiting with bated breath.
I'll tell you if you want to know. You want me to tell you?
No, don't tell me. I even went so far, Carlin, as to stop listening to the soundtrack after Defying Gravity. I'm like, I have not listened to a Wicked song after that point.
But you do listen.
Well, I do. Let's pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. It's not like I listen casually or for fun. I don't enjoy it.
What's your favorite song?
I don't have one.
But if you did,
No one mourns the wicked. No one mourns the wicked. But sorry, that just slipped out.
Casey, do you think you're more of an Alphaba or a Galinda?
I can't get past the moral realism question.
No.
Sorry. Let me just go with
No, let's go because that's what this podcast's about.
Because if right and wrong are real categories, then whether you're an Alphaba or a Galinda is just a question of whether you like sparkly pink things or dark, moody black colors
orange cat
to
or black
dress
cat
in.
energy.
What's your vibe, you know? And that's a fun question. I love it. But don't tell me that that's the real question that we're trying to get at with Wicked, because I don't believe you. There's too much going on here. It's not like pick your path. It's like, it's a real question about right and wrong that it's not quite willing to embrace that side of itself. Okay, that's it.
Yeah. No, I think you're totally right. And like that question, pink sparkly or black moody, is so fun. And I think we're all, because we live in a culture that is so concerned with self-actualization and your identity and presenting, you know, like your style and your vibes and your reputation and all this stuff. But our culture is really not that, seemingly, enchanted with the idea of character or right and wrong or, you know, proving your moral fortitude. Those aren't really hot topics right now.
No, but when we see them in action, they're irresistible.
Yeah.
And Elphaba's character is awesome. We love her.
Yes.
Carlin, we've done a lot of criticizing of Wicked, but when we talk about our Christian worldview, can we talk about actually what the things that I think Wicked gets completely right?
Such as?
I'm going to quote historian Tom Holland again and again on this podcast because his premise is that we all live in a Christian world, whether or not you are Christian. We all live in the world that Jesus built, essentially, and all the hypocrites and people who abused his message that came after him don't change the fact that we live in the world that Jesus built. And Jesus says in Matthew's gospel, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." And when Jesus said those words, there's no overemphasizing how radical they were. You know, we talked about the Stoicism we saw in Gladiator a little bit, or how the Stoic philosophy was in the water, right? And essentially that's a philosophy of it doesn't matter what happens to you. The worst thing in the world could happen to you. What are you going to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
Like you have no excuse. There are no excuses for anybody, right? And Jesus somehow is able to shoot that gap and rehumanize the poor, the meek, the downtrodden as image bearers of God. No one had done that in the same way before him. The Romans he encountered would have laughed at that, except for, ironically, a few faithful ones who had power but were humble enough to seek Jesus out, and he actually welcomes the outsider in. He says, "Truly, I haven't found faith like this." He's talking about a centurion there, anywhere in Israel. And the good Jewish people who thought they understood what goodness was were like, what the heck?
Yeah.
When he says, "All right, guys, we're going through Samaria," you can picture his good Jewish disciples saying, "Why are we going through this part of our country, which is basically filled with heretics, colonizers, like half-breeds, essentially, are the Samaritans." They're like kind of Jewish, but they kind of have like Greek and they kind of have like Phoenician elements to them. They were like pretty pagan. And Jesus says, we're going through their territory.
Yeah.
And actually preaches the good news of the kingdom to them. Jesus normalized welcoming in the outsider and the outcast and the downtrodden and the powerless. That is part and parcel to what it means to be a Christian, is to have eyes to see the poor.
Mm-hmm.
And so the moral clarity that Wicked brings to that question of outsiders versus insiders is a direct result of a Christian worldview. And to the extent that certain stories these days take that too far and basically say, like, if you're rich, you're bad. And if you're poor, you're good. If you're an outsider, you're a hero, uncorrupted. And if you're an insider, to the extent we take that too far, we're just being a Christian heresy, essentially. Because Christianity is the religion of the downcast, the powerless, the poor, the widow, the suffering. It's a suffering Messiah. That is the
Yeah.
cornerstone of what we believe, right?
Yeah. But that's also, I mean, like you said, not all poor outcasts are good and the rich powerful are bad, because the truth Christianity brings to the table is that all of us, no matter how popular you are, no matter how socially acceptable you are, all of us have wickedness in us. All of us are outcasts from the kingdom of heaven, and we all need a savior. Even the good, shiny ones,
That's
even
right.
the Pharisees, who seemed to be like they were supposed to be, you know, they were it. They were supposed to be like they've got everything together. I wanted to
Right.
say they're the shiz, but I didn't because
You could you? Are we allowed?
but even that, like, Jesus pokes holes in them, as well as, you know, the scrappy thief on the cross needed a savior, and so does
Absolutely.
Nicodemus.
But here's the moral nuance Jesus brings to it. He doesn't pretend like being rich and being poor are equivalent. He's fully aware that there's unique challenges for each of those, and that's why he says it's easier for a rich person to fit through the eye of a needle. Sorry,
Yeah.
let me say that correctly. That's why he says
Depends. It depends on how skinny they are.
That's why he says it's easier for a camel to fit through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter heaven. And all his disciples are like, well, dang, Jesus, then who can be saved? And he says, with human beings, that's not possible. But with God, all things are possible.
Right. Because he was saying that the view at the time, correct me if I'm wrong, but that they believed that, you know, if you have financial blessing or rich, you know, if you're well off, then you're blessed by God because of the good works that you or your forefathers have done.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
the rich, successful, and, you know, obviously you still have to be following Jewish law. So like if you're following the law and you're rich, then you're God's favorite, like a gold star
Yeah.
upon your head, because
Yeah.
you're killing the game. And Jesus is like, nope,
Yep.
harder for them.
Yeah. And what matters is not what's on the outside. It's what's from inside a person that defiles them, right?
Yeah.
But there's so many layers to it. It's tiramisu, right? On one level, material riches make us attached to this world. And they blind us from seeing the truth of reality, the truth of the kingdom of God, which is that the poor are blessed by God. And that's why it says in John's gospel, when the light came into the world, the people hated it because their deeds were evil. And because we live in a fallen world, ill-gotten gain is not the exception. It's kind of the rule in a lot of ways.
Mm.
You know, not every way. It depends on what society you live in. But rich people often acquire riches by unscrupulous means. The Bible's not naive about that at all. It's just a big enough worldview to incorporate all of it. So Jesus frequently points our attention to the unique pitfalls of being rich.
Mm.
He doesn't pretend there are no pitfalls to being poor, but a lot of his message was, watch out, don't go after material gain, because you could gain the world but lose your soul.
Ooh. Yeah.
And if we were looking at Wicked with clear eyes, we'd say, wow, that's exactly what Galinda did. She gained the world but lost her soul.
Yeah.
You know, she can't even really do magic, I think. I don't know, that's my impression.
She can pop a bubble and make a bubble, supposedly.
That's impressive. I'm not going to lie.
I could make a bubble. Watch this. Just kidding.
Ew, gross.
That was a joke for the podcast, because you can't see that I'm not blowing
You
snot
can't
bubbles.
see it's
I'm
a
sorry.
podcast. So there is a sense in which outcasts have a unique perspective on the character of God, but it's not just because they happen to be excluded at that moment. It's kind of because you can start to love the things of the world
Mhm.
more than you love the giver of those things. That's a Christian worldview, right?
Because maybe the challenge for the poor then is, I mean, it's not unique to them either, but the challenge of forgiveness. Like Jesus doesn't let anybody off the hook when it comes to forgiveness. Like if you've been swindled or beaten down or whatever, like for instance, Jesus teaches that if, you know, the Romans had this law where if they saw any peasant or so, they could just demand that they carry their stuff with them for a mile. And Jesus says, if someone asks you to do that, then walk with them 2 miles. If someone asks for your tunic, give them your cloak as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Turn the other cheek.
Yeah.
Like, this is all over Jesus' teaches. It's not easy to be poor.
Yeah.
He asks you to even, be poorer for the sake of the gospel and to love your neighbor.
Right.
Even if your neighbor is also your occupier.
This is why it's the greatest moral teaching of all time, because without making being rich and being poor equivalent all the time, he's able to call everybody to a new level of forgiveness and repentance. So he looks at the rich Pharisees and is like, you think you're doing great. You're not. You're whitewashed tombs. And so there you go. He's like criticizing the powerful. But then when a centurion, literally the occupier, comes to him, he's like, I haven't seen faith like this in Israel. So there he's lauding the powerful who have the humility to see that Jesus is sent from God, right? And so you could picture all the poor Jews being like, yes, stick it to the oppressor, stick it to the rich people, stick it to the powerful. But then you can picture them all being like, wait, what the heck? Why are you talking to a centurion? He's friends of everybody. He's friends of centurions, tax collectors, prostitutes, and even Pharisees. When a Pharisee, Nicodemus, comes to him in the middle of the night, he's not like, get out of here, you Pharisee. He sits there and answers his questions.
Man, it just goes to show, like, well, Jesus is for everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone needs him.
Yeah.
And everyone can have him if you choose to.
Yeah.
If you choose him.
Yeah. And in that same vein, I would argue everyone has the choice before them about how they treat our fellow image bearers. When we're talking about outsiders, insiders, you can choose to live into your prejudice based on which of those two camps you fall into. Oh, look at those insiders, snobby. I hate them. Oh, look at those gross outsiders. Keep them out, Or you can choose to see people as human beings and let your prejudice down. When it comes to seizing our power, we have the choice to make. You can neglect your, I would argue, responsibility if you've been given power to do the right thing. Or you can step into it in a way that's healthy and appropriate, right? You have courage to go against a corrupt system even if you're the only one. You can also justify your use of power by being like, everyone's been mean to me and I've been oppressed for so long that now I can do whatever I want. You can live into that victim mentality, or you can choose not to. We have that choice, even in a work that tries to subvert goodness and evil like Wicked. Unless it carries that nuance with it, it just becomes another vanilla take on goodness and evil.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going to land for now. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see where we go from here. Come on.
Yeah, me too. The best stories are the ones that have a clear moral decision. Even if all the external factors muddy it and make it confusing or interesting or whatever. But when you see the character encounter a real choice to do what's right or wrong, and if they do what's right, they're a hero, and if they do what's wrong, they might be an anti-hero. But either way, we're talking about, the real stuff of life, which is...
Yeah.
which is the battle between good and evil.
That is, everything we care about falls into that category of the cosmic clash between goodness and evil. Everything else is pretty uninteresting.
You might think it is, but it eventually will kind of come up empty. It doesn't have staying power.
If you'd rather live in a world without goodness and evil, I would argue that's the allure of evil pulling on your heart. That's the tastiness of evil. You want to pretend like they don't exist so you can get what you want. If you enjoy things like friendship, like welcoming in marginalized people, like not falling for facades of power, then actually you're in love with goodness. Because goodness involves telling the truth, even if you're the only one. And it involves doing the right thing, even if you're the only one. Right? You're in love with goodness. And it involves humanizing and loving people. So you love goodness. I would take it a step farther, Carlin, and say our worldview commits us to loving even the stuff of creation for its goodness. People are like, well, what is the material world? Is it good, bad, or neutral? And a lot of Christians are like, it's neutral. It's what you do with it that counts. I actually think Scripture tells us that when God created the world, he sat back and said, it is good.
Yeah.
And so the seemingly neutral stuff around us is actually good intrinsically. And it can be corrupted and used for evil, but it's not neutral. And on that note, when I watch a film like Wicked and I see an incredible train that they made and I hear some actresses absolutely crush a musical score, I love that stuff. And even though we spent this whole podcast talking about the implicit worldview themes, I actually can chew the meat and spit the fat with something like Wicked and truly just love it for what it is.
Yeah.
It is incredible art. I think we can just say that and just almost leave it
Absolutely.
at that when it comes to the art of it.
And
yeah.
and just the friendship of Alfie and Galinda is so lovely and so worth celebrating. You know, like even that is a precious good that it's fun and awesome.
And when we lose it, it's rightly
Yeah.
tragic. And that's the best gut punches this thing delivers. Is they came so close.
Guess we'll find out.
Or so I think. I don't know anything. What's going to happen?
My question still stands though. Are you more of an Alphaba or more of a Galinda?
You know, Carlin, when I was 13, this pudgy, homeschooled Christian youth group kid, speech and debater, went through a bit of a skater phase. And so I would definitely say I'm an Alphaba. I'm a bad
Yeah, I
boy
think-
for life. I'm outside of your little system.
Everyone who knows you would say
you know.
that for sure. Yeah.
They would. Look at that maverick father figure,
He
30-something-year-old.
doesn't care what people think.
I don't even give a care.
Get out there and strut your stuff.
Carlin, what about you? You
Oh, I'm a Galinda, duh, because everybody likes me.
Oh. Wow, that was simple. Okay, cool. All right, you cinema
Bye.
snorkelers. Cinema
Snorkel. Thanks for hanging out with us.
you crazy, desperate, raving fans. We love you. We know you. We got to give the people more of what they're craving. And what you're craving is more Cinema Snorkel. We hear you.
All right. Calm down. We're going to make more episodes.
We have lives, okay? Like and subscribe.
Bye, guys.